The soft hum of jet engines filled the cabin of Flight 237, cruising at 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. The overhead lights glowed dimly, casting a warm golden hue over the passengers who had settled in for the long flight. Some were sleeping, others were watching movies, and a few murmured in hushed voices as flight attendants glided down the aisles offering drinks. But amid the peaceful atmosphere, something was about to break the tranquility. A moment that would turn this ordinary flight into an unforgettable event. Before we dive deeper into this gripping and exciting story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if tales of courage, action, and standing up for what's right inspire you, don't forget to subscribe to Story Dash. Soon, we'll share another story that will leave you speechless. At row 17, a young woman with long brown hair sat pressed against the window seat. Her eyes were downcast, her fingers nervously gripping the armrest. The man beside her, broad-shouldered with an expensive watch on his wrist, leaned toward her, whispering something under his breath. His tone wasn't affectionate, it was laced with anger. Passengers nearby stole glances, sensing the tension, but no one spoke. No one wanted to get involved. The woman flinched as the man suddenly grabbed her wrist. "Are you even listening to me?" he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the plane. She tried to pull away, her voice timid. I don't want to argue right now." But that wasn't the answer he wanted. The man's grip tightened, his knuckles turning white. That's when a deep, calm voice broke through the tension. "You're gonna let go of her wrist." The man turned his head sharply, his expression shifting from fury to confusion. A few rows behind him, Jason Statham had turned in his seat, his sharp gaze locked onto the couple. Dressed casually in a dark gray hoodie and jeans, he looked composed but dangerous, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. The man scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Mind your own business, mate." Jason's eyes didn't waver. "You're making it my business." Passengers who had been avoiding the scene now openly watched, sensing the electric tension building in the air. The man let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, I see how it is. You think you're some kind of tough guy?" Jason's smirk was barely noticeable, but there was something in his expression, something dangerous and controlled, that made the air feel heavier. "I don't think," Jason said smoothly. "I know." The man's jaw clenched. His ego wouldn't let him back down. The woman, who had been silently watching, suddenly gasped, her eyes widening as recognition dawned on her face. She turned toward her partner, nudging his arm urgently. "Wait, do you even know who that is?" she whispered. The man frowned, looking back at Jason more closely. His arrogant expression faltered. He blinked, his mind scrambling to process what his girlfriend had just realized. Jason Statham. The Jason Statham. His face paled slightly, a flicker of uncertainty creeping into his once confident eyes. "Listen, old man, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to back off." Jason leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "You do know who I am," he said simply. A flicker of hesitation flashed in the man's eyes. He looked closer, and then he realized. Jason Statham. The man swallowed, suddenly aware that the stranger he had just mouthed off to was one of the most dangerous men alive, on and off screen. The tension between them was suffocating. Passengers held their breath. "Let go, officer, wrist." Jason's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 1,000 threats. The man hesitated for just a second before yanking his hand away, scoffing as he did. "This is ridiculous." The woman cradled her wrist, her relief obvious. Jason wasn't done. His eyes never left the man. "You don't talk to her like that again. Ever dot." The man huffed, running a hand through his hair, trying to save face. "You think you're a hero, huh?" Jason gave the faintest smirk. "Nah, just don't like cowards." A few passengers chuckled quietly, but just when everyone thought it was over, the man snapped. With zero warning, he lunged at Jason, his fist flying straight for his face. Gasps erupted through the cabin. A flight attendant screamed, but Jason had already moved. With effortless speed, he ducked, sidestepped the attack, and in a single swift motion, grabbed the man's wrist mid-air. The attacker's eyes widened in shock. Jason twisted his arm just enough to make a point, not enough to break it, but enough to send a wave of pain shooting through his body. The man let out a choked gasp, his knees buckling. "You're gonna sit back down," Jason murmured, his voice as cold as steel. "And you're gonna stay there for the rest of the flight. Understand?" The man nodded frantically, his face contorted in pain. Jason let go abruptly, and the man collapsed into his seat, clutching his wrist. A moment of stunned silence filled the cabin. Then from the back of the plane, a slow clap. One person, then another, until the entire cabin erupted in applause. A flight attendant rushed forward, speaking quickly into her radio. "Captain, we have a situation in economy class, row 17. A passenger attempted physical aggression and was restrained." Jason, hearing her, sighed slightly and looked toward the cockpit. He knew what was coming next. Minutes later, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. We want to assure all passengers that safety is our top priority. Thanks to the quick response of some individuals, an incident has been de-escalated. We will be making an emergency landing at the next available airport where authorities will handle the matter." But just as everyone thought the danger had passed, the man, still fuming with humiliation, made one last, desperate move. With a snarl, he reached for a nearby passenger's drink and flung it straight at Jason's face in a pathetic attempt to regain control. The cold liquid splashed across Jason's hoodie, but he barely reacted. Instead, he slowly turned his head, locking eyes with the coward who had just sealed his fate. Jason took a deep breath, cracked his knuckles, and in one smooth motion, leaned in and whispered, "Now you've really pissed me off." The man's confidence shattered completely as Jason loomed over him, his presence alone enough to make him shrink into his seat. Passengers gasped, waiting for the final blow. But instead, Jason merely wiped his sleeve, shook his head, and smirked. "Not worth it," he muttered, before turning away. But everyone on that flight knew the man had just survived the closest thing to a real-life action movie he would ever experience. The woman turned to Jason, her voice trembling. "Thank you." Jason nodded. "You all right?" She hesitated, then nodded. The flight attendant placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like us to move you to another seat?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, please." The abusive man sat stiffly in his seat, his face burning with humiliation. Would you have done what Jason did? Let us know in the comments. And if you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Story Dash for more action-packed, unforgettable tales. Because sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't take superpowers, just courage.